It was a cold and misty evening when Emily first arrived at Briarwood Manor, a grand but dilapidated estate that had been abandoned for decades. The manor stood atop a hill, shrouded in mist, its Gothic spires barely visible through the fog. Stories about the place were as thick as the ivy that choked its walls, whispers of tragic events, strange occurrences, and a lingering presence that had driven the last inhabitants away. But Emily wasn't one to be scared off by tales of ghosts. She was an investigator, drawn to the paranormal, and she had come seeking answers. As she pushed open the heavy iron gate, its rusty hinges creaked, echoing through the stillness of the night. The gate resisted at first, but with a final heave, Emily forced it open. The path leading to the entrance was overgrown, the once manicured lawns now wild with weeds. The wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint, unpleasant scent of decay. Stepping inside the manor, Emily felt a sudden chill, as if the building itself was exhaling a cold breath. The foyer was vast and dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the broken windows. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by Emily's presence for the first time in years. Her footsteps echoed loudly as she moved deeper into the house, the floorboards creaking under her weight. The chandelier in the main hall, once a centerpiece of elegance, now hung askew, its crystals tinkling faintly in an unseen breeze. Emily paused, taking in her surroundings. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the manor itself was aware of her presence. She made her way to the grand staircase, her eyes drawn to a large portrait hanging above it. The painting depicted a stern-looking woman, her face severe, her eyes cold and penetrating. As Emily ascended the stairs, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the woman's eyes were following her every move. Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed the front doors shut, the sound reverberating through the house like a gunshot. Emily spun around, heart pounding, but saw no one. The temperature dropped sharply, and she could see her breath in the air. The house was trying to frighten her, she thought, but she wouldn't be so easily scared. She had come to find the truth, and she would not leave until she had it. As she explored further, Emily discovered a dusty, forgotten journal on an old desk in the study. The leather cover was cracked and brittle, the pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully, the pages filled with handwritten notes and ominous warnings. The journal detailed strange occurrences in the manor, objects moving on their own, shadows with no source, and the eerie feeling of being watched. The last entry was hurried, the writing shaky. "She's coming for me. I hear her in the walls. I'm not strong enough to resist." A sudden darkness fell over the room, and Emily felt a cold breath against her neck. She spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the shadows, but found nothing. Yet, the whispering continued, growing louder, as if the walls themselves were speaking. "Leave now, or stay forever." The voice was faint, almost a hiss, but unmistakable. Emily turned to see a figure standing at the far end of the room, its form obscured by shadows. It was tall, almost too tall, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. She could feel its gaze on her, piercing through the darkness. For a moment, she was frozen, fear gripping her heart, but instinct took over, and she fled the room, running blindly through the twisting corridors. The manor seemed to shift around her, the hallways elongating, the walls closing in, turning her desperate flight into a nightmare maze. Every door she opened led her back to the same room, the study, with the journal open on the desk and the shadows deepening. Her own footsteps echoed back at her, distorted, mocking. "Help me," she screamed, but the house only laughed in return, a low, menacing sound that reverberated through the walls. The figure appeared again, closer this time, its hollow eyes fixed on her. They were the same eyes as the woman in the portrait, but now they were filled with an unspeakable sorrow, a void where humanity once resided. Emily's breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. This was the spirit of the woman in the portrait, forever trapped within the walls of Briarwood Manor, seeking a replacement, someone to take her place. With a final, blood-chilling scream, the ghost lunged at her, its form dissolving into the shadows that surrounded Emily, enveloping her in darkness. She felt herself falling, the ground giving way beneath her feet, the air growing thick and suffocating. She tried to scream, but no sound came out, her voice swallowed by the void. When Emily awoke, she was lying outside the manor, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The mist had lifted, revealing the manor in stark relief against the morning sky. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare, but the memory of the haunting was too vivid, too real. Her clothes were damp with dew, and her hands were scraped and bruised as if she had clawed her way out of the house. She staggered to her feet, her legs unsteady, and made her way to the car. As she drove away, the manor receded into the distance, but the sense of unease lingered. Even as she left Briarwood Manor behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her, that the ghostly presence of the woman in the portrait was still with her, watching, waiting. Emily knew she would never return to Briarwood Manor, but she also knew that the haunting would never truly leave her. The curse of the manor had taken hold, embedding itself in her mind, her soul. And as she drove into the rising sun, she couldn't escape the fear that one day, she would find herself back at the gates of Briarwood, drawn inexorably back to the place where it all began, to face the ghost that now haunted her every waking moment.